My name is Craig Schultz, and I'm an engineer, and I live in Grand Haven with my wife and 2 sons, and I'm here to talk a few minutes about our different sources of where we get our energy from. And when we're talking about energy, most of our energy sources that we use today have a tendency to pollute our environment, whether it's chemicals or toxins or carbon dioxide. We're concerned about those because those aren't necessarily sustainable things for our environment, for our health. But I want to make a confession here. I didn't get involved in the energy issues because I was concerned about the environment. I got involved in, as a business person, in environmentalist interests because I wanted to save money. I wanted to reduce my transportation costs, and so I built an electric motorcycle, and that's my motorcycle there that I built. I wanted to reduce my home energy costs, so I installed LED light bulbs and solar panels on my house. But today I have, I have good news, and I have some bad news. We're going to have, we have a whole group of speakers. They're on the agenda. I'm going to start out just talking about where we are with our energy situation as far as where we get our energy today. And then the other speakers, things that we can do for saving ourselves money and for doing good things for our planet. So unfortunately, I get to start out with the bad news. And that has to do with, I'm going to talk about all of our sources of energy. Here's a picture of a coal plant in Germany putting out the types of things that coal plants emit. Probably the most pressing issue that a lot of people are concerned about is the issue of global warming, which they feel could be caused by the rapid increase in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. This chart shows over the last 8,000 years, actually 10,000 years, that the carbon dioxide level in our atmosphere was relatively stable. And that here in the last few hundred years, we started to see a rapid and dramatic increase in the level of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And there are some people that believe that when we cross the threshold around 350 parts per million, which is about here on the chart, that we reached a point where we could actually be getting to a tipping point, a point where there might not be a return from. And they actually predicted that before we reached that level, and we zoomed right past it. So this issue of global warming, I live in Michigan, and I didn't really worry about it because, the planet getting warmer seemed like a good idea to me. I'd like it to be a little warmer a lot of times, and maybe the water levels rising, maybe I live inland, and maybe I would get beachfront property, and so I didn't think that would be a big problem. But the major issue with global warming, if it causes dramatic and weather, or weather that's very severe, more hurricanes, more tornadoes, these type of severe weather that disrupts our commerce, global warming has, if it causes that, has the opportunity to affect our economic well-being. And we know that our economy is kind of in a fragile state, and so we don't want it to have any more damage to that than it needs to get. So that's, again, I'm looking at it from an economic standpoint. So a concern of the carbon dioxide levels could be that it would affect our economy. So let's look at our current energy status. On the table back there, there's a handout that looks just like this, and please feel free to take that handout if you haven't already. This chart shows where we get our energy from, and it also shows how we use it. And so I'm just going to talk just a couple of minutes about this chart, and then we'll look at each of these energy sources in a little bit more detail. First of all, petroleum is where we get most of, 36% of our energy. And it's primarily used, this chart is really neat because it shows where it goes. 71% of our petroleum goes to power transportation. Natural gas is our second largest source of energy. And natural gas is a very functional source of energy. It's used for a lot of different things. It's used for home heating. It's used as an industrial feedstock for doing a lot of chemical processes, things that we enjoy in our lifestyle. It is also used to produce electricity. Coal, 20%, and this is, we often hear that coal is 50% of something. It's 50%, about 50% of our electricity production in this country comes from coal. But in the total energy scheme, about 20% of our total energy comes from coal. And it's primarily used, 91% of it is used to generate electric power. Then we have renewable energy, which just 5 years ago was around 7%. It's moved a couple of percentage points just in 5 years. Is primarily, half of it is going to produce electricity. And then we have 25% of it going to support industrial purposes. And finally, we have nuclear electric power. And it shows that 100% of our nuclear power in this country is used to generate electricity. So we'll just talk about each of these, a little bit of the pros and cons of each of these energy sources. First of all, petroleum. How many here today did not come in a vehicle that was powered by oil? I mean, gasoline. Did anyone come here in a steam-powered car? Did anyone ride a bicycle or walk? Did anybody come in a full electric vehicle? Okay. Neither did I. I drove a gasoline-powered car. And we rely on petroleum very heavily for transportation. Everything that we, every place we're going, for the most part, is powered by petroleum. And all the goods and services, the food that we're getting in our grocery stores, the things that we enjoy that are made in factories, they're all mostly moved around with petroleum. It is our transportation fuel. And the reason it is because it's relatively inexpensive and it's very energy dense. Gasoline as a fuel, it has an incredible amount of power in it, just a gallon of gasoline. And we don't appreciate that when we're driving our car down the road, but a car, like commute here today and back home, for many of us, will take more energy for that commute than our house will for the entire day. So it's something that is very convenient, and we enjoy it. It's part of our standard of living. The cons of petroleum is that it's an expensive national security issue. We do not have enough sources of oil in this country to provide all of our oil needs, and so we import it, and we need to protect those interests overseas. And so we get into a fair amount of conflicts, and we spend trillions of dollars, frankly, to protect our petroleum. Peak oil. Apologize for moving that again. We've heard about peak oil, and peak oil is the understanding that maybe we've discovered all the oil there is in the planet, or that we're using it more quickly than we find it. Some things that support that would be the fact that, for instance, this is a picture of an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. The Deepwater Horizon platform, the one that kind of had a fire and leaked a few years ago, that was in a mile of water, and it was drilling 6 miles once it got under, to the ground underneath the water. So we're drilling 7-mile-long wells to find oil in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. That's very expensive to be drilling out there, and that speaks to how our reserves are dwindling, that we would need to go to such extreme measures to find it. Tar sands is another good example. It's a very sticky, tacky substance, and it's relatively hard and energy intensive to get good gasoline or oil out of that, but it's something that we're doing because the sources of really pure oil are getting less and less. Another con is that oil is creates about 33% of the carbon dioxide, and we have the issue of oil spills. You know, the tankers that run aground and the pipelines that break and leak into the Kalamazoo River and the things like that. Natural gas. 25% of our energy comes from natural gas. The pros are it's a very clean. It's the cleanest of our fossil fuels. For instance, if a car was running on natural gas, it emits very little particulate matter. It burns very clean, like on the stovetop picture here. When we have natural gas stove, it doesn't have a lot of emissions there that we can see or smell. And it's cleaner than coal as far as carbon dioxide. When it's being burned, it emits about half the carbon dioxide of coal. By a raise of hands, how many people heat their homes with natural gas? Okay. So that's good. What are some other people heat your homes with that didn't raise your hand?
Gas.
LP, propane,
Wood.
heating oil, wood,
Geothermal.
geothermal, good. And the natural gas infrastructure is in place. It comes to our house in pipes, so that's a nice way to get it easy. The cons, there's issues with fracking that many of you are aware of. When the gas itself leaks, which is estimated perhaps up to 10% of the natural gas through the drilling process and the process of getting it to our homes or the places we're going to use it, that perhaps up to 10% of it is leaked into the atmosphere. And it is 20 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. So that's a significant contributor to the greenhouse gas issue. And then, of course, it is a CO2 producer, even though it's cleaner than coal. For coal, the pros are that it's very relatively inexpensive, and we have huge, vast supplies of it. Here's a coal mine, a strip mining, and the United States has vast reserves. China has vast reserves. Those are the reasons we use it. It's cheap and it's plentiful. The cons are that it's dirty. We recognize that. It emits 50% of the carbon dioxide that we get into our atmosphere. Mercury, lead, other things are part of the smokestack emissions, and they land on our soil and the water, and they make it back into our food stream as a result of that. There have been some pretty strict regulations put in place about carbon dioxide emissions, and that's what's making the coal-fired power plants becoming obsolete in this country. It's getting too expensive to build new ones, so they're looking to build, for instance, natural gas plants. It is our dirtiest fossil fuel. Nuclear. 8% of our energy comes from nuclear. It emits very little CO2, although during the mining process there's the machinery to mine the uranium, you do have carbon emissions there. It's very energy dense. The Palisades nuclear power plant's around its size. To compare it to, say, wind turbines, we had, the beginning of 2013, we have 562 wind turbines, big industrial wind turbines in Michigan. And all of those wind turbines were putting out about the same amount of power that one Palisades was putting out. So it has a very small footprint, and there's a lot of power in nuclear energy. The cons are the waste storage issue. We don't know how to get rid of or safely store the waste. They'll need to be stored safely for up to 250,000 years. It has a very large risk footprint. We know from other disasters that have happened, like Chernobyl and Fukushima, that it can affect huge land masses with one accident. For instance, here's the emergency planning zone. And if we were to superimpose Chernobyl over the state of Michigan, there's no place in the state of Michigan you could move that would be safe from an accident, a major accident at Palisades. So if there is a problem, it can be very huge in scale. We have the problem of weapon proliferation. that you know, the spent fuel can be used to make nuclear weapons and also be used for terrorist purposes. And they're very expensive to build and decommission. Renewables. The pros of renewables are that they don't emit carbon dioxide. We have a limitless supply, and it's decentralized. That's an important issue. When we produce power, for instance, at Palisades, and I get it at my house in Grand Haven, we've lost maybe 10 to 25% of that electricity through transmission. Whereas when we produce the power at our home, you lose less than 5% getting it from the wind turbine or the solar panel to your home. So that's an important percentage when we're talking about saving energy. The cons are that in the past we've had very high initial costs, and it's some of the sources of renewables are intermittent, like the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And it doesn't tend to be super energy dense, certainly not as dense as nuclear or fossil fuels. Other options, things like burning wood to heat our homes or to heat our water. Wood can be a carbon neutral source of energy. The downside with wood is that to be sustainable, I've heard that you need around an acre of standing wood to be able to keep that sustainable, and maybe some of the other speakers today will be able to speak to that issue. So certainly for people who have access to this amount of standing forest, it's a good issue, or it's a good alternative. The hydrogen economy, the main problem with that is that there's some problems with conversion efficiency. The creation of the hydrogen tends to take a lot more energy than you're able to get out of it. And so, for instance, it's more efficient now to just store energy in a lithium-ion battery than it is to, for instance, store it as hydrogen and then use a fuel cell to get that power back. And so economics are driving that one to become, right now, it's not a viable option. Biofuels. The idea that we could use maybe corn or grasses or different organic materials to make gasoline. I did the calculations a couple of years ago about a myth that one tank full of gasoline would need the same amount of corn as it would to feed a person for a whole entire year. And unfortunately, that's not a myth. If you were to use corn to make gasoline, it would about a year's supply of corn is what it would take to fill a gas tank on a mid-size American automobile. So because, let's move to the next slide, let's just talk about our current status. Our current energy mix is not sustainable if we think about the emissions and especially the carbon dioxide issue. We'll get to a point where we can't continue, it will affect us in severe ways. We know our population is rising. There's some interesting statistics. 400 million people in the country of India don't even have electricity yet. There's 1 billion people on this planet who don't have electricity at all. One of the first things that developing nations implement when they're developing is electricity. And the next thing they want is cars, mobility. So we have a lot of people that are wanting to have more energy use. Even in this country, we're seeing that people, as they're moving, they're looking to get electric cars. And the question is, where are they going to get that electricity from? We're already over our limit on carbon dioxide. We need more land, or we need land and clean water to supply our food for these billions of people we have on this planet. And given these things, we know our energy demand will increase. Our installed capacity, things like our coal plants, our nuclear plants, our methane, our natural gas plants, those things have a life of 20 to 40 to even 60 years. They aren't things that you just dispose of if they're still functional. So we're going to keep using those to generate electricity and power, and they're going to keep creating emissions. Okay, so and also our cars. Typically our cars last 20 years. So my car's not worn out yet. I plan to replace it with an electric when it does wear out. but it has a few years left. So we're not going to see an immediate shift to stop producing energy with dirty fuels, or even our consumption isn't going to change overnight. Here are some predictions about our future energy consumption. This is from the a U.S. government agency. They're projecting that pretty much it's going to be status quo for the next 30 years. Use about the same amount of natural gas, same amount of coal, petroleum. Renewables aren't going to get that much more prevalent. And our energy use isn't going to go up that much. Here's another projection from a different group. And this is probably a more reasonable projection, and that's saying that our energy use over the next 30 years is going to nearly double. And that our use of conventional fossil fuels and nuclear will stay about the same, and that our use of renewables will probably go up. And from the research I've done, I think that's probably a reasonable prediction. This is another way to look at the future, and this is all our fossil fuels and nuclear, and this is an idea that we can phase those things out, and by 2050 have phased in all the renewable energies, and with conservation to actually be in a completely sustainable planet. And this would be the ideal place to be, that we would not be polluting the environment anymore, and that the carbon dioxide issue would be addressed. So that's all bad news. That's where we are, right? The good news is that today, energy choice, that has always been, I shouldn't say this is a new thing, our energy choice has always been driven by economics. And that's good news today, because today, in 2014, renewables actually make economic sense. You can install solar panels on your house, you can put insulation in your house, you can install LED lights in your house. They all have a return on your investment. They will pay for themselves over time. And that wasn't always the case. It used to be that, solar just a few years ago was 5 times as expensive as it is today. This is a graphic from Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth video, and he was saying, the problem was here, people were trading gold for the planet. And I'm saying that this is obsolete today, because today green energy is economic. Maynard, am I out of time here?
Go for another couple.
Okay. So our required solution really is we need to look at reducing our personal consumption. Well, when we go back to that very first slide, when we looked at the renewable energies are only providing less than 10% of our energy. If we wanted to get in balance today, what that would mean is that we would only be able to use about 10% of the energy we're using today. We would have to reduce our consumption by almost 10 times to get in balance. And that's a huge shift. That's a lifestyle change. That's like not your house. Downsizing your house by half its size and insulating it much better. It's a huge change in consumption. And it's also the massive adoption of renewable sources. If we believe that the carbon dioxide issue is a real issue, and if we believe that it can destabilize our economy and perhaps crash our economy, and then we need to take action. The question is, how quickly do we need to take that action to avert this disaster? And the question is, can we do it quickly enough and at enough scale? The question of can we as individuals cut our consumption by 90%? Can we get all of our energy from renewables? Can it be done? Yes, it can be done, one person at a time, starting with you and with me. And there are people in this room that will be presenting here after me who will demonstrate that it can be done. In the last 3 months, I have actually been able to move to being 100% powered by renewable energy, or electricity. Not by just these panels, but by I'm actually paying extra on my electricity bill to buy renewable energy through my electricity provider. These panels provide about 20% of the electricity this house needs. But the important thing down here is that while doing that, I reduced my energy bills in the process. This is my energy bill this month. And these are the last 2 months with some of the changes that I've done as a result of the research I've been doing with Michigan Safe Energy Future. And you can see this month right here should be equal to this month back here, and it's not. And I have some other graphs and data to verify that the changes that I've made, and they were very slight. In my home, I installed all LED lighting, and I got this home energy meter for my house, and I was able to get rid of my phantom loads in my house and reduce my electric consumption by 25 to 30%. So with just a couple $100 investment, in fact, this is the investment I'm recommending. There's a sheet on the back table. I'm not saying go out and buy $1,000 of solar panels. I'm saying do a couple $100, a focus on where your energy use is, and it'll pay back in just a few months. It'll pay for itself. So that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? We're actually, Maynard, you're the moderator at this point.
Are there any questions? Comments?